Harold James knew every crack in the linoleum of Baycrest Market. He had worked the night shift as a stock clerk and cleanup man for 22 years, a steady presence beneath humming fluorescent lights. He was a single dad, quiet, careful, practical, raising his daughter Nora with the kind of steady love that came from missed sleep and extra overtime. People in town saw him push carts, smile at customers, and bless the kids who waved. He was not a man who needed praise. On a rainy Tuesday morning, everything in the store moved like slow water. The bell above the door, the drip of a roof leak, the shuffle of a shopper's cane. That afternoon, a black car with expensive rims pulled up and a man in a tailored coat stepped inside. Ethan Whitcomb, the tech magnate whose name was on every local donation board, came in like he owned the place. He frowned at the slow lane, at the single open checkout with Harold working, and he spoke loud enough for other shoppers to hear. "Is this the best you can do?" he asked, voice cool. "This takes forever. Can't you move faster?" People with businesses can't wait in these lines. The store fell a fraction silent. Harold looked up, palms a little damp, and said, "I'm sorry, sir. We're doing our best." Ethan smirked and left an impatient tip and a cold word. The old woman at the magazine rack clutched her purse like a small animal. Nora, home from school with a fever that day, curled under a blanket and coughed. Harold rinsed his hands and kept working. He could not let one moment break the slow rhythm of what he had built. That evening, Harold locked up and walked the 30 minutes home through streets that smelled like wet leaves and fried pies. He thought of Nora's cough and the unpaid medical note on the kitchen counter. He thought of the text from his landlord asking for rent 2 days ago. He thought of the fluorescent hum of the store, the only reliable electricity in his schedule. Steady hours, small paycheck, dignity kept by honest labor. Nora was smaller than he remembered when he first held her. Her hair smelled of lemon soap, and she smiled like a secret when he gave her supper. She had been born the week the market remodeled. The doctors had warned that the next winter might be hard for her lungs. Harold had learned to sleep with his door half open. He kept a thermos of warm soup on the counter and a list of phone numbers of neighbors who could help when the weather turned cruel. 2 days later, there was a notice at work. Whitcomb Corporation was hosting a charity gala, and Baycrest Market had been asked to donate gift baskets. Harold volunteered to help with the packing because it meant extra hours. At the packing table, he watched the town's wealth move like plastic. Ribbons, branded boxes, polite smiles. Ethan Whitcomb arrived again, this time wearing a watch that could buy a month of Harold's groceries, and he scanned the room as if evaluating a machine. Harold felt the weight of inequality as a private ache, the kind that sits behind the ribs and lets you breathe but never fully relax. That night, Harold told Nora he'd try to pick up extra shifts. She pressed her small hand into his calloused palm and said, "Daddy, don't worry." Her faith felt like a small light. Harold believed in that light the way some people believe in prayer, quietly, stubbornly, with a lifetime of practice. The charity night was overstuffed with silver trays and speeches. Harold had stayed late to wash plates and gather broken ribbons while the donors posed for photographs. As the room emptied, he carried crates to the loading bay. He moved with muscle memory until he heard frantic shouting from the valet area. A little boy had fallen and hit his head near the entrance. People had gathered in a ring, hands flapping like nervous birds. Someone called for an ambulance. Others took videos. Harold pushed through because he had seen falls before. Old men, kids chasing a dog. When he reached the boy, he recognized the glossy suit and the watch. Ethan Whitcomb's grandson, a freckled child with a bruise blooming at his temple. The boy was crying, the crowd murmuring about liability and nerves and how quickly someone should have acted. Ethan rushed forward, his face breaking into something like panic that was not in his public speeches. Harold didn't hesitate. He scooped the boy, whispered calm words, and checked for signs of concussion. He had once worked extra shifts cleaning a small clinic in the next town, and memory kept him steady. He wrapped the child in his jacket, carried him to a chair, and stayed until the paramedics arrived. Ethan hovered, angry and ashamed, and suddenly small. People who had watched him scold Harold 2 days earlier now watched him stand mute. When the paramedics cleared the boy, Ethan leaned close to Harold, voice trembling. "Thank you," he said, but there was something else in his eyes, something like surprise. Harold nodded, wiped his hands on his apron, and went back to crates. He had done what needed to be done. Outside, the valet took off his gloves and lit a cigarette, whispering, "Guess he can't run the world without help." The next morning the papers ran a small photo, Harold handing the boy to a paramedic. The caption called him an everyday hero. The headline caught a fire in Ethan's life that he had not expected. He could not stop thinking of the exhausted man who had been polite when insulted and steady when needed. Something about humility gnawed at him. Ethan visited the market the following week, not for a photo op, but quietly, with no cameras. He watched Harold stack cans, watched how customers spoke to him with affection. He noticed the way Harold's hands worked, slow and sure like a craftsman. On his way out, Ethan handed Harold a card. "Meet me tomorrow," it said, no fanfare. Harold assumed it was a check, some corporate thank you. He did not go expecting a miracle. They sat in a small diner. Ethan began clumsily. "I said things I shouldn't have. I didn't know." He told Harold about boardrooms and numbers and long flights that had taught him to value outcomes over people. Harold listened, steady, not because he wanted praise, but because he had seen the boy bleed and felt the human cost of rushed life. Ethan surprised him. He handed Harold an envelope and a key. The envelope held enough money to cover Nora's treatments for a year. The key was to a tiny coffee shop Ethan had been planning to open, a place he wanted run by someone who knew real work. "I want you to run it," Ethan said. "I want people to be treated with the dignity you showed." Harold felt everything tilt. He thought of late nights, of Nora's cough, of his father's hands. He swallowed the present and, for the first time in a long while, let himself imagine rest. Harold refused the word charity. He said, "I'll do it my way. People who come will feel like they belong." The town watched as the coffee shop opened months later. A plain sign, strong coffee, and a Sam's table of donated bread. Nora helped paint the chairs. Ethan often came in not as a donor, but as a guest, sitting at the corner table and listening. The lesson was simple and slow. Money could fix bills, but only people could fix loneliness and pride. Harold taught the town, and Ethan Whitcomb, that real work carries dignity because it keeps people alive, not because it looks good on paper. And for Nora, who learned her father could make both coffee and a room of friends, the world felt like a place with more light. The slow rhythm of the market and the quiet warmth of the coffee shop became a new kind of prosperity for Baycrest, one built on respect, steady hands, and the belief that dignity is the truest kind of wealth.
Got a topic in mind for the next story? Comment it below.